You didn't move because you had it all figured out. You moved because something in your soul recognized the one who called you. You weren't following directions, you were following presence. That kind of obedience shakes things in the spiritual realm. While others waited for certainty, you stepped out with nothing but faith. You didn't chase a flawless plan, you trusted a flawless God. You didn't need every question answered, you just needed one whisper. And when you heard it, you moved, even if it meant walking alone. You left comfort. You entered isolation. People misunderstood you, laughed at you, called you foolish, and still, you kept going. Not because you had no fear, but because something sacred inside of you whispered, "Keep moving," and you listened. You weren't chasing outcomes. You were chasing alignment. You knew that being in God's will was safer than being in the world's approval. And let's not forget, plenty of people saw you moving and thought you were confident. But what they couldn't see was the trembling faith underneath it all. You didn't always feel strong, but you stayed faithful. And in God's kingdom, faithfulness is strength. Every step you took in the dark, every silent sacrifice, every quiet yes, God saw all of it. You weren't just following Him for blessings. You followed Him because of love, because of covenant, because of trust. And that heart posture, that's what heaven responds to. You obeyed when it was painful. You obeyed when it made no sense. And that obedience planted something unshakable in the spiritual realm. It was a seed, one made of raw, unfiltered faith. And now, it's harvest time. This elevation you're walking into, it's not just a blessing, it's a result, a visible echo of what you've already sown in the unseen. God is lifting you not because you chased the spotlight, but because you walked faithfully through the shadows. You proved that you can walk without sight, trust without answers, and move without applause. That kind of obedience, it qualifies you for the kind of promotion no man can stop. You didn't cheat the process. You didn't fake the moment. You didn't try to force anything to happen. You waited, you remained, you endured. And now, heaven isn't just clapping for you. Heaven is moving for you. Because when you chose to obey in the silence, when you said yes without clarity, you showed God something powerful. You showed Him that you weren't in it for the outcome. You were in it for Him. And that, chosen one, is exactly why He's elevating you now. There were times when God went silent, and you stayed anyway. You didn't just live through those seasons, you survived them. Nights where your prayers echoed back at you, mornings where heaven felt a million miles away. You begged for answers, pleaded for direction, but all you heard was stillness. And yet, you held on. That's where your faith was truly tested. And while your heart questioned, "Did God forget me?" you still believed He hadn't. You looked around and saw others being blessed, doors opening for people who didn't even acknowledge God. And there you were, faithful, waiting, stuck in what felt like a hallway that never ended. The silence, it wasn't just quiet, it was loud. It rattled your confidence, made you doubt your worth, your path, even your prayers. But you didn't walk away. You didn't let silence shake your belief. That's what made you different. That's what made you chosen. You didn't serve God for the benefits. You served Him because of love. You praised through the pain. You prayed when it felt pointless. You stayed loyal when running would have been easier. And heaven saw all of it. That kind of endurance, it doesn't go unnoticed. Anyone can trust when things are easy, but you trusted in the middle of the unknown. You trusted when nothing made sense. That kind of trust is rare, and it shakes things in the spirit realm. You weren't walking by sight, you were walking by memory, by covenant, by the deep relationship you've built with God. Every time you opened your Bible with a heavy heart, every whispered, "I still believe," every tear-stained prayer, you were sending shockwaves through the atmosphere. You didn't even realize it, but your faith was loud, even when your mouth was quiet. Your consistency in silence became your strength, and heaven took note. Those silent seasons, they weren't punishment. They were preparation. God was watching how you would respond when there were no miracles, no signs, no encouragement, and you passed the test. Not because you were flawless, but because you stayed. You hung on when you had every reason to let go. You thought he was silent because he'd left, but the truth is, he was watching you grow, watching you become the kind of vessel he can trust with more. He knew that if you could trust him in silence, you wouldn't lose yourself when the noise came. If you could stay grounded without applause, you wouldn't become prideful when the spotlight hit. If you could worship in the valley, you'd remain humble on the mountaintop. It was never just about what you could survive, it was about who you were becoming in the process. And now that you've been refined in the quiet, God is about to speak loudly through the blessings coming your way. Doors are going to open that you didn't even knock on. Miracles will show up in places where you stopped expecting them. That silence you once resented, it's about to become the platform for your greatest testimony. The hush before the breakthrough is ending. God is flipping the volume, and the world is about to hear what heaven has been preparing in secret. What you endured in stillness is about to echo in celebration. Now let's talk about something else. The way you stayed pure when the world told you not to bother. When the culture pushed compromise and made fun of integrity, you chose the narrow path. You could have lowered your standards. You could have numbed your convictions and joined the crowd, but you didn't. You stood tall, even when people laughed. Even when they called you too deep, too sensitive, or too holy. What they mocked, heaven called sacred. You didn't just say no to what the world offered. You guarded your spirit. You didn't flirt with temptation. You slammed the door in its face. You didn't just protect your body. You protected your soul. You didn't chase attention or applause. You stayed hidden, stayed consecrated, even when it meant missing out on certain relationships, groups, or opportunities. But you knew something others didn't. Purity isn't weakness. It's a form of spiritual warfare. Purity isn't just about actions. It's about thoughts, motives, and intentions. And you fought for all of them. You didn't let bitterness take root. You didn't let jealousy drive your choices. You didn't let ambition contaminate your calling. You kept yourself clean, not for show, not for likes, but because you knew God was watching. And that level of discipline, that kind of sacred resistance, it's the reason God is about to pour out something holy over your life. You didn't just avoid corruption, you preserved the anointing. Let's be real. Staying pure in today's world isn't just hard, it's a battle. Every screen, every scroll, every conversation tries to chip away at your boundaries. But you didn't bend. You didn't water yourself down to feel accepted. You could have taken the easy way out. You could have told yourself, everyone else is doing it, but you didn't. You stayed rooted, even when it hurt, even when it felt like no one understood why you were choosing the harder, quieter, holier path. You said no when your heart was lonely. You walked away when your flesh was hungry for attention. You deleted numbers, left conversations, skipped invites, not because you thought you were better, but because you knew your calling was bigger. And maybe no one saw those moments. Maybe no one clapped, but God did. Heaven took note of every time you chose conviction over convenience. Every time you cried yourself to sleep because purity cost you connection. And heaven wrote it down as worship. You weren't trying to impress people. You were protecting your oil. And let me tell you, that kind of protection isn't just rare, it's powerful. Because in a world that's selling cheap imitations of love, pleasure, and purpose, you held out for the real thing. And now, God's about to trust you with something real, something lasting, something sacred. Not because you were perfect, but because you were pure. You proved that your soul can carry weight without breaking under temptation. This is why God elevates purity, because the higher He takes you, the more dangerous the temptations become. And He needs people who won't sell their integrity for influence. People who won't lose their voice in rooms filled with power. He needs leaders who can be seen without being seduced. And you've shown Him. You're that kind of person. You can hold favor without folding. You can handle visibility without vanity. You can wear authority without losing your soul. And that's why your elevation will be different. It won't come through flashy connections or manipulated platforms. It will come from God's hand alone, because you didn't climb over people to get here. You didn't play games. You didn't compromise. You just stayed faithful. You stayed clean. You stayed true. And because of that, what's coming won't just be big, it'll be holy. God's not just giving you a stage, He's giving you a mantle, and He can trust that you won't worship the stage. You'll worship the one who put you on it. There were times you felt forgotten, like your sacrifice didn't matter. You looked around and saw people doing the bare minimum and still getting celebrated while you were giving everything and getting silence. But what you didn't know is that while the world overlooked you, heaven was storing up every single act of kindness, every quiet moment of generosity, every time you gave from a place of emptiness. You were blessing others while praying for someone to bless you, and God never missed a moment of it. There were days you had nothing left, yet you still showed up for someone else. Not because it was easy, but because it was who you are. You carried other people's pain while silently wrestling with your own. You gave when your heart was bleeding. You comforted when you needed comfort. You smiled for them while crying behind closed doors. And you did it without making a scene, without asking for recognition. That kind of love, that kind of quiet service, it speaks louder in heaven than any platform ever could. You weren't doing it for applause. You were doing it because your heart was aligned with God's. And that's why your reward won't be surface level. It won't be temporary. It won't be something that fades in a week. This blessing that's coming, it's not a surprise breakthrough. It's a harvest, a full circle moment from seeds you planted in tears. And it's going to show up so big, people who never saw your sacrifice will still see your reward. Not because you demanded it, but because heaven declared it. The truth is, you became the answer to someone else's prayer while still waiting on your own. And now God is making you the evidence of His faithfulness. He's turning your quiet obedience into a loud testimony. Every drop of compassion you poured out when you had nothing left, He's turning it into overflow. Every moment you gave without asking anything in return, He's multiplying it and sending it back, pressed down, shaken together, running over, not just to bless you, but so you can keep blessing others. And more than that, you're not just about to receive a blessing, you are becoming one. Your presence will bring peace into chaotic rooms. Your words will bring life where people have felt dead inside. Your story will be proof that you don't have to be rich, connected, or perfect to be powerful. You just have to be surrendered. You gave when you had nothing, and now you'll walk with everything you need, not to flaunt, but to fulfill your purpose. You're about to be poured into because you poured out when you were empty. You've never been the type to blend in, and honestly, you weren't meant to. From the start, you knew something about you was just different. Maybe you tried to hide it. Maybe you dimmed your light, toned down your truth, tried to fit into places that felt safe. But no matter how hard you tried to shrink, your spirit wouldn't let you. You weren't designed for blending. You were built to stand out. And deep down, even in your loneliest moments, you knew you were set apart. There were times you wished you could just be normal. You tried to laugh at jokes that didn't sit right, nod at opinions that clashed with your core, pretend to belong in circles that drained your soul. But the ache of inauthenticity was too loud. You couldn't keep faking it. You couldn't betray who you were becoming just to feel included. Even when the silence got loud, even when the rejection stung like fire, even when loneliness wrapped around you like a second skin, you stayed true. You stood tall in your truth. People didn't always get you. Some called you too intense. Others labeled you too spiritual, too deep, or just too much. But here's the thing. They weren't wrong about you. They just weren't ready for someone like you. You weren't too much. You were just too chosen to be average. Your purity made them uncomfortable. Your clarity made them insecure. Your fire exposed their shadows. And instead of adjusting your flame, you let it burn. You didn't let rejection redefine you. You let it refine you. You could have played it safe. You could have changed your tone, diluted your message, followed trends, smiled on cue. But you didn't. You weren't chasing applause. You were chasing assignment. And because of that, heaven took notice. God saw the doors you walked away from. He saw the stages you declined, the conversations you stayed silent in, the validation you let go of. Not because you didn't want it, but because you refused to get it the wrong way. You weren't out here selling your soul for a seat at the table. You were trusting God to build your own. And now, He's doing exactly that. The very version of you they said was too much is the version He's about to showcase. The oil they mocked is the oil He's about to pour. The same integrity they couldn't understand is the very foundation of the next level He's calling you into. You stood your ground while others bent. You stayed rooted while others shifted. And because you didn't conform, you're about to be elevated. Not as a copy, but as the original you were always meant to be. You didn't just stand out, you stood alone. And that kind of isolation, it leaves marks that no one sees. Nights where you questioned if being different was even worth it. Mornings where you looked in the mirror and wondered why your path had to be so lonely. You weren't trying to be rebellious, you were just trying to be real. But real gets rejected, real gets misunderstood, real gets left out, and still, you chose it. Not because it was easy, but because it was honest. Because you'd rather be whole and alone than fake and surrounded. You've lost things because of that choice. Friendships that couldn't handle your growth. Opportunities that didn't align with your truth. Relationships that were rooted in comfort, not calling. And yes, it hurt. It hurt to outgrow what once felt like home. It hurt to walk away when your heart still cared. But you knew that staying would cost you your soul. And you decided, even through the tears, I'd rather disappoint them than betray myself. That choice? That's the kind of courage heaven rewards. You didn't water yourself down to be more digestible. You didn't hide your light just to make others feel comfortable in the dark. You showed up fully, even when the room wasn't ready for you. Even when your boldness was labeled arrogance. Even when your standards were called pride. You didn't let the world shame you out of your truth. You didn't let loneliness make you desperate. You didn't let silence convince you to settle. That resistance, that sacred defiance, it's holy, it's warfare, and it's the reason you're being lifted. Because God's not looking for people who can play the game. He's looking for those who can carry the weight. He needs voices that won't fold when the pressure hits. Hearts that won't switch up when the crowd shifts. And you've proven you're not in this to be seen. You're in this to be used. You're not trying to impress. You're here to impact. You're not chasing relevance. You're chasing righteousness. And that makes you rare. That makes you ready. That makes you chosen. So when the spotlight hits, don't flinch. When the doors swing open, don't doubt it. This isn't luck. It's alignment. You've been hidden, but not forgotten. Set apart, not sidelined. God's about to elevate the very thing people told you to tone down. The same fire they told you to extinguish is the fire He's going to use to light up nations. You didn't bow to fit in, and now you're rising to stand out. Not because you wanted to be seen, but because you refused to disappear. This is what happens when authenticity becomes your altar. You kept the faith when everything around you screamed the opposite. When the facts were brutal, when reality laughed in your face, when the reports, the numbers, the outcomes all pointed toward defeat, you still chose to believe. Your bank account said, broken. Your body said, sick. Your situation said, impossible. But your spirit whispered, God's not done. And you listened to that whisper. You clung to it like a lifeline, even when everything else was falling apart. You didn't pretend the facts weren't there. You just refused to let them be final. You stared straight at the storm and declared peace. You looked at the mountain and spoke to it like it would move, because in your soul, you knew who your God was. You weren't denying your pain. You were declaring your promise. And while others called you delusional, heaven called you dangerous. Because faith like yours shakes foundations. It rearranges atmospheres. It gets heaven's attention. See, anyone can believe when the evidence lines up. But you believed when there was nothing to stand on. You walked on spiritual muscle memory. You praised like the breakthrough had already happened. You carried yourself with the dignity of someone who had already won, because you knew the promise was real, even if it hadn't shown up yet. That kind of faith isn't fragile. It's forged. It's refined in fire. And it's why the next doors are about to fly open without warning. Every time you prayed with empty hands, every time you danced in your dry season, every time you spoke life when you felt dead inside, You were building something in the invisible. You thought you were surviving, but in reality, you were shaking heaven. You didn't fold when it would have been easy. You didn't let the devil rewrite your story with evidence. You responded with scripture, with covenant, with relentless trust. And every time you did, the atmosphere around you had to shift. You were moving things in the spirit while it looked like nothing was happening in the natural. But now, the natural is about to catch up with what your faith already knew. This next season, it's not just a reward, it's a reflection of your faith under fire. You're about to see things shift, not because you begged, but because you believed, because you didn't wait for the blessing to act blessed. You lived like it was done. And now, heaven is confirming what your faith never let go of. You had every reason to flex, every right to prove your worth, to show the receipts, to say, "I told you so." You could have aired it all out, could have clapped back, defended yourself, and shut down every lie. But you didn't. You chose silence over noise, peace over pettiness. You let dignity speak where your voice could have shouted. That wasn't weakness. That was strength under control. That was power submitted to something higher. You trusted God to handle what you had every reason to handle yourself. You stayed quiet while your name was dragged. You stayed low while others took credit. You swallowed the urge to correct people who misunderstood you, not because you didn't care, but because you cared more about your posture than your pride. You knew the difference between winning the argument and winning in eternity. And so you took the low road, the humble one, the one no one celebrates, but heaven never forgets. Because you weren't seeking revenge, you were sowing reverence. You didn't need the spotlight to feel validated. You didn't use your wins to gloat or get even. You just kept showing up with grace, with gratitude, with grit. And that heart posture, that's rare. Most people fall in love with the platform. You stayed in love with the presence. You didn't chase recognition, you chased alignment. And because of that, God's about to lift you in a way no one can deny. Not to prove something to people, but to prove that humility is still the fastest path to honor. Heaven always exalts the humble. That's not just a principle, it's a law, unshakable, irrefutable. When you choose not to fight for your own seat, God prepares a table for you, in full view of the ones who counted you out. And this table, it won't be out of spite. It'll be out of purpose, because you didn't let bitterness rot your roots. You let silence strengthen your spirit. And now, the same grace that kept you grounded is the grace that's lifting you higher than you imagined. What's coming next won't be built on networking or clout. It'll be built on trust, God's trust in you, because He saw that you wouldn't let success change your soul. He watched you stay small in secret places so He could make you stable in public ones. And now, the time has come. The season has shifted. This elevation, it won't be temporary, and it won't be for show. It will be pure. It will be permanent. It will be powerful. Not because you shouted louder than the crowd, but because you bowed lower than most ever will. You didn't just wait quietly. You transformed while waiting. Every time you were overlooked, you became more rooted. Every time they passed you by, heaven pulled you deeper. You didn't sit in bitterness. You sat in surrender. You didn't let delay define you. You let it develop you. And now, God is about to make visible what has been growing in secret. This elevation, it's not hype, it's harvest. It's the release of every silent yes, every restrained reaction, every decision to stay humble when you could have made it about you. People saw the outside, but they never saw the cost. They didn't see the restraint it took to not defend yourself. They didn't witness the tears you cried after being dishonored. They didn't feel the weight of staying pure in a world that rewards compromise. But God did. And He wasn't just watching, He was storing. Every moment you laid your pride down, heaven laid another brick in the foundation of your promotion. You were building legacy with every moment you didn't clap back. This kind of promotion, it doesn't come through connections. It doesn't come through charm. It comes through character. God waited until He saw that your heart could hold the weight, until your posture could carry the promise, until your spirit was strong enough to stand in the spotlight without getting intoxicated by it. And now, He's opening doors, not to impress people, but to express His faithfulness through you. He's using your story to remind others what humility can do. You've proven something many never will, that you can walk in favor without losing yourself, that you can carry oil without getting arrogant, that you can hold position without performing, that you can be lifted and still look up, still bow down, still point back to the one who placed you there. That kind of posture, it can't be faked, and it's exactly why what's coming to you will last. It won't crumble. It won't corrupt you, because it's built on surrender, not ego. So now, heaven speaks. It's time. Time for the light to hit what was hidden. Time for the reward of private obedience to break out in public honor. Time for the tables to turn, not out of revenge, but revelation. God is showcasing what he built in the quiet. And you, chosen one, are the proof that staying low is never wasted. That character still matters. That silence is sometimes the loudest sermon, and that humility always has the final word. This was never about fame, never about being seen. It was always about becoming the kind of vessel heaven could trust, becoming someone who doesn't just carry the promise, but embodies the process. And now, every silent surrender, every painful obedience, every lonely stand, it's all converging. All of it was training. All of it was molding you for this very moment. And now, the weight of glory is descending, not to crush you, but to confirm you. You've crossed a line in the spirit. You're not who you were when this journey started. You've been stretched, broken, refined. You've walked through fire and came out carrying something unshakable. Not pride, not perfection, but purity, perspective, power. Not because of your strength, but because you stayed even when it hurt. You obeyed when it was dark. You blessed when you were bleeding. You believed when the facts were against you. You humbled yourself when you had every right to defend. And now, heaven isn't just lifting you, it's backing you. You're not walking into rooms alone anymore. You're carrying presence. You're walking in as an answer. You're stepping into atmospheres as a living message. Not a sermon, but a testimony wrapped in skin. And people will feel it before you even speak. Because this isn't the result of branding. It's the fragrance of brokenness turned into beauty. It's the aroma of sacrifice, the oil of surrender, and it will mark every space you enter. From this point forward, things won't be the same. Doors that were locked will recognize your knock. People who ignored you will be drawn to what's on your life. But you won't need to explain yourself. You won't need to prove anything. Your story will speak for itself, and every step you take will echo with the authority of someone who was chosen, not because of who they impressed, but because of who they endured with. Your crown isn't made of gold, it's made of scars that turned into glory. So walk forward now, not with arrogance, but with assurance. You've earned this, not by striving, but by surrendering, not by hustling, but by holding on, not by proving, but by staying planted. And now the soil you cried into is about to bloom. The silence that taught you will soon be the sound of celebration. Heaven has called your name, and the world is about to witness what obedience, purity, endurance, and humility really look like when they all rise together. This isn't just the end of a message, it's the beginning of a new realm for you, a crossing over, a sacred unfolding. You didn't just survive the waiting, the silence, the fire. You were transfigured by it. The version of you that's emerging now is holy ground, not because you're flawless, but because you're yielded. The wilderness didn't break you, it baptized you, and you're coming out carrying authority, not as a title, but as a truth branded into your spirit. This elevation isn't about being lifted above others, it's about being lowered into purpose. You're not rising to be seen, you're rising to serve, and what's on your life now cannot be stolen, copied, or imitated. It's been forged in secret, authenticated by heaven, and sealed with fire. You are no longer who you were, and you never will be again. You walk with the wisdom of someone who has wrestled with God in the night, and come out with a limp of reverence and a roar of clarity. So when the doors open, walk through with a bowed heart and lifted hands. When favor falls, don't chase the applause, chase the assignment. Remember who kept you, refined you, reshaped you, And never forget that the strength you carry is sacred. Let your life preach. Let your stillness speak. Let your presence be proof. You weren't just chosen to rise. You were chosen to reveal God in the way you move, speak, give, and forgive. That is the true elevation. And when the next trial comes, and it will, remember this. You've already walked through fire. You've already waited in silence. You've already obeyed in the dark. That means you've already been made. Nothing ahead can undo what God did in the deep places of your becoming. You are unshakable because your roots are not in popularity, but in promise. Your crown isn't for decoration, it's for dominion. Wear it with wonder. Carry it with grace. Let it shine with humility. If your soul knows this was for you, don't leave in silence. Type, "I'm ready," in the comments. Not as a reaction, but as a declaration. Let heaven hear it. Let the atmosphere shift with it. And share this with someone else who's been quietly carrying the weight of becoming. They need to know. They're not crazy. They're being called. And if you haven't yet, subscribe and stay connected. This isn't just content. It's a lifeline for the chosen. And this journey, we walk it together now.